Last summer, a group of college friends gathered at the Jersey Shore, amid the chaos of 4th of July celebrations. The lights were bright, electronic music was blasting across the beach, and the booze was flowing. But behind the laughter and fireworks, a dark reality awaited them. As the night fell and the crowds dispersed, they found themselves stranded in an uncharted stretch of coastline. Their phones were down, their distress calls went unanswered, and someone or something was following their every move, leaving silent tracks in the wet sand and whispers in the wind. One by one, they began to disappear. No blood, no screams, just an eerie silence and the empty eyes of those who remained. An ancient rumor of darkness beneath the sand began to resurface. Secrets from the past buried by the group emerged with the nightmare. None of they knew that night was not only about life and death, but also the final judgment for what they had hidden. Meet Jimmy, the man behind it all. He's been called T-Genius of the dance floor, a sensation in the electronic music world, rising as if some invisible force had pulled him from the depths of darkness. But to those who really know him, Jimmy has changed frighteningly fast. Tonight, he's hosting the biggest event of his life. It's something almost surreal. The lights are cold. The music is a lullaby from hell. The narrator and Ryan, two longtime friends, are VIP guests. They're free to roam, drink whatever they want, and join the hypnotized crowd. But no one really has control over what's happening that night. There are moments when the lights flicker, and they see unfamiliar faces, pupilless eyes, smiling blankly in the crowd. Ryan whispers, "I don't think Jimmy is himself anymore." And it was hard not to agree, because the music started to sound off, like it was calling their names. A party? No. This was the door. And Jimmy had the key. 4 hours passed, and their high reached a false light, golden, but not real, intoxicating, blurry, like standing on the edge of a cliff without the fear of falling. When the first DJ took the controls, the sound reverberated like a metallic clash in hell. The crowd roared like a giant being awakened. The smoke machine hissed, spewing out a thick mist that smelled of ozone and something like burnt flesh. The night had come alive, but it was no longer a human night. Ryan and the narrator could no longer tell the difference between excitement and danger. All they knew was the feeling of flying, of being excited and then sinking, like being swallowed into an inescapable dream. The laughter around them rang out off-key, like it was being played back on a broken cassette tape, and for a moment the strobe lights flickered out. They could swear there was someone standing on the opposite side of the crowd, face not turned toward the stage, but looking right at them. No blink. Then they appeared, Gianna and Marcella, two strange women emerging from the mist as if they did not belong there. Sharp, slender, encased in designer clothes, jet black and spotless. No one saw where they came from. No one saw them walk through the door. They were just there, blood-colored cocktails in hand, smiles drawn on their lips as if they knew what was coming. Gianna and Marcella locked eyes with the two men at the same time. Ryan and the narrator, swaying to the frantic beat of the music, felt mesmerized. The night suddenly shrank, blurred, leaving only their eyes as deep as a chasm, as beautiful as a curse. The night began to change direction into a private, secret journey, with no return. No one around noticed. No one intervened. As if the crowd were being controlled too. As if Gianna and Marcella were not looking for adventure save, but be prey. Marcella tilted her glass, pouring more of the liquid that shimmered like dark honey. smooth, sweet, and irresistible. The scent drifted from the glass like a light trance, slowing time. No one asked what it was. They just drank, glass after glass. The sensations grew numb, but instead of drowning, they felt too awake, almost surreal. Then Marcella tilted her head, smiling an unreadable smile, her eyes piercing their minds. "Come with me. My house is on the beach. It's more beautiful than you think." The voice was soft, like a whisper from inside their dreams. No one asked for directions. No one hesitated. They just stood up, as if pulled by an invisible string. Outside, the night was thickening, the sea breeze had shifted, and the moon was obscured by a dark cloud that crept silently across the sky. They walked slowly along the beach, silver moonlight pouring over the breaking waves like the cold breath of the ocean. The wind carried the scent of salt and something else, damp, fishy, like rotting moss stirred up from the depths. Gianna and Marcella led the way, their bare feet seemingly skimming the sand without leaving a trace. The conversation drifted, free from the usual Jersey Shore cliches. They talked about Nietzsche, about Jungian dreams, about reincarnation and ancestral memories etched in blood. Their words were less like philosophy than like manifestos. The words were razor sharp, beautiful but cold. Ryan was absorbed in the conversation, mesmerized. But the narrator began to feel different. Things weren't blatantly wrong, but they weren't right either. The wind seemed to stop touching his skin. The moon too bright, too still, and Marcella's words echoed in his head longer than they should have, as if they hadn't come out of his mouth, but were implanted. It started in his legs, weak, as if his knees had been stripped of their tendons. He tried to take a step, but it felt like he was moving a hollow mannequin, his body light where it shouldn't be light, heavy as stone where it should be flexible. Something was terribly wrong. Not tired, not drunk, just possessed. His mind toppled. Everything was blurry, like looking through a rain glass. But worse, he was still fully conscious, as if drowning in his own head. No control over his arms, legs, speech, only his gaze, trapped in a body that was falling apart. He understood immediately this wasn't alcohol. This wasn't drugs. This was something intentional, and it was starting to eat him up from the inside. The door opened not into a house, but into a maze so opulent it seemed unreal. The black stone floor was as polished as water, reflecting the dim light from the high ceiling. Each statue on its pedestal was not decoration, but a person, or had been a person, frozen in some twisted pose, face upturned, mouth agape. No one touched them. No one looked at them for long. The white walls were cold, smooth as porcelain, but as he passed them they seemed to murmur not in words, but in feeling, as if someone were speaking his name in his ear. Soft, damp, and very close. Marcella said nothing. She took Ryan's hand, leading him into a small passageway behind the grand staircase. Ryan looked back for a second. His blank expression had been erased. Only Gianna remained. She stood opposite, motionless, as if she had been waiting, her eyes unblinking, her smile as still as stone. She stepped closer, bowed her head, and her lips brushed his lips. And everything collapsed. No light, no sound, just a deafening buzz and deep darkness, like being swallowed up by the house itself. Everything stopped, as if the world had been squeezed out for the last second. He remembered Gianna leaning in, her scent like wilted lilacs, and then emptiness. No flash of memory, no echo of sound, just a black void, as if something had entered his head and sucked it all out. He opened his eyes. He didn't know how long. He didn't know where he was. Time was no longer linear, just a broken, cold, distorted sequence. His head spun like it had been turned inside out, but it didn't hurt. Worse than that, it was empty. The void wasn't silent. It was whispering. Dawn. The first light filtered through the tattered trees, cold and indifferent. He opened his eyes. His face was pressed against the ground, littered with rotting leaves, broken branches, and something sticky like rotting flesh. The stench filled his nostrils and made him gag. Blood or something else, he didn't know. His body was limp, but there was something even more wrong. His clothes. Not his. A wrinkled old t-shirt, stained with black oil. Strange jeans, ripped at the knees, soaked and cold. Inside, the pockets empty. No phone. No wallet. No keys. No name. No trace. As if he had never existed. He looked down at his hands. Cold, purple, with a strange bruise running from wrist to elbow, like a vein squeezed dry. His head was spinning. 10 hours gone. No dream, no sudden awakening from a hangover. Just white, thick, solid, silent as a coffin lid closing. Something had happened. It wasn't just being drugged. It was being displaced. As if for those 10 hours, someone else had lived in his place, in this very body, and now they were gone, leaving behind an empty shell, a shattered ego, and a screaming question in his brain. Who am I now? He staggered into a nameless 7-Eleven, its neon lights flashing in judgment. The air inside was too cold, too clean, so fake it made his skin crawl. His face was pale, sweaty, and unspoken with fear. The cashier didn't move, just looked at him as if waiting for some invisible signal. I need to make a call, he said. His voice choked as if he were relearning how to use words. His hands shook as he held the landline phone covered in opaque tape. He dialed the number wrong. Dialed again. Wrong. It took him a third time to reach his sister. Allie? It's me. You have to come pick me up. Please. Behind him, the doorbell rang ding. He turned. Ryan walked in. He was soaked, naked to the waist, shaking as if he had been dragged up from the bottom of the sea. His eyes were wide, unfocused, as if something else were looking through them. His hands were bleeding. No one asked why. No words. Just a cold agreement. They had both come back from a place that didn't exist on the map. And the scariest thing wasn't the place. It was the feeling that it was still looking at them, from inside them. They called the police. 2 officers appeared, red and blue lights flashing across their pale faces, as if examining the victim, not helping. At first, their voices were gentle, sympathetic, but then, skeptical. You guys just had too much to drink. Jersey Shore, right? Everyone has a story to tell after the night's over. But Allie, his sister, held up the phone. Her voice trembled. Find my iPhone shows both phones abandoned, in a vacant lot a few blocks away. Silence. The older officer frowned. The younger one looked at his watch. Their eyes changed. Not suspicious. Fear. Slight, very slight. Like they'd heard something similar before, but never wanted to confirm it. I need you two to sit down and tell me everything. From the beginning. But they couldn't, because memory is like a magnetized tape, a blank. And the more you try to remember, the more you feel it was like something inside their heads was warning them not to. Narration. Back home, his hands still shaking, he flipped open his phone. The screen glowed in the cold darkness of his room like a knife to his eyes. He scrolled through the sent messages, and there they were. A string of messages, regular, neat, smooth to the point of being lifeless. Thanks for the great event. Home resting now. Great night. Thinking of you. Not a single memory matched. Not a single word was his. But they were sent from his number, with perfect punctuation, with a calmness he hadn't had that night. A chill rose in his stomach. He reread each line and realized the most horrifying thing of all. It wasn't someone else's. It was himself, but a version of himself he didn't remember. A mechanical, polite, alien him, as if programmed. He stared at the last word, thinking of you, and suddenly felt something is still reading with you, behind you, in your head, inside your phone. They retraced their steps toward the shore. Their footprints from the day before were now washed away in the cold sand. The house was still there, magnificent, silent, and as strange as ever. But it was not the same as the night before. The glass doors were covered with strange dust, and the footprints and sand were blurred into gray, wind-blown lines. They knocked. After a long while, footsteps were heard. The door opened slightly. An old man appeared. His face was wrinkled, his eyes dull as if he had not blinked in years. He stared at them. Marcela? He repeated the name as if he had never heard it before. I have lived here for 30 years. No one like him. No parties, no guests. You must have come to the wrong place. The door closed before they could react, but it was not the refusal that silenced them. It was the smell. From the crack in the door, the smell of cold metal mixed with the familiar scent of expensive perfume, the smell of the night there. And inside the door, they swore they heard something dragging, slow, wet. Their chests tightened. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't their imagination. Instinct screamed something bad had happened here. And maybe it wasn't over. To this day, they still don't know what really happened. Drugs? Organ harvesting? A well-orchestrated kidnapping? Or something even darker, beyond human comprehension? They have no answers, only fragments of memories, time erased as if someone had brainwashed them. They no longer trust themselves. The nightmares repeat over and over the sound of waves, the smell of perfume, the pale white light, someone's hand on the back of their neck. They no longer sleep deeply. They no longer laugh for real. They start seeing strange figures on the street, eyes that stare at them longer than usual. Worse than the fear is the feeling of being invaded, forced to live a night in another life with another identity, another memory, a body that doesn't belong to them, as if someone borrowed their body for some purpose, and then returned it when it was done. And deep down they know it hasn't been, it's over. It's just set back to prepare for next time. One hot summer night, Ariel drove alone through deserted country roads to a 4th of July party in remote Alabama, where a few old friends called with sweet promises of fireworks, laughter, and a youth long gone. But as the car turned onto the red dirt road that led to a cabin nestled in the woods, the darkness seemed thicker, ashen. There was no sound but the crunch of tires on crushed stone. Firecrackers flickered in the distance like desperate Morse code. The laughter from the house sounded like an old record, distorted and looped. And when Ariel stepped into the glowing circle of the campfire, she saw them, the old friends, smiling motionless, eyes wide, unblinking. No one spoke. No one moved. They just stood there, as if they had been waiting for her for a long, long time. The night ended at 10 o'clock, no greetings, no parting glances. Just a strange feeling that someone was trying to hold her back. Ariel quietly got into the car, slammed the door, and all the sounds behind her died away. She drove out of the cabin, the tires crunching on dry gravel, into the thick darkness of the Alabama countryside. The road back was a long, narrow black line, wrapping around her like a tightening thread. On either side were rows of trees, pines and oaks, standing still as stone, so thick that the headlights could only shine a few feet before disappearing. No streetlights, no rest stops, nothing but the thick, blood-clotted darkness that threatened to swallow the fragile light from the headlights. She wasn't sure if the tires were real. The sound echoed like an echo from a dream. Each beat felt like it was about to break. The fuel gauge dropped, the red warning light flickering like a heart in her throat. Every turn was a held breath. Each bush by the road was a figure still, but tilting its head to watch. And the third time she saw it, a figure thin, tall, headless, standing upright in the middle of the road, silent, not moving. She turned the wheel, her heart pounding, cold sweat sliding down her spine. But when she turned back, there was only space. No one, no footprints, nothing. She began to breathe rapidly. Her head was spinning. And then the radio, even though it was off, came up with a low hum, like a whisper. A word repeated, turn, around. 30 minutes after leaving the cabin, the headlights flashed behind her, harsh, white as a surgical light. A gray Nissan Altima, caked in mud as if it had just emerged from underground. It didn't pass. It didn't back up. It kept just enough distance to show up in every mirror, persistent as a slow burning wound. Ariel tried to accelerate. The car followed. She eased off the gas, and it slowed. Every time she made a sharp turn, it leaned in as if it had learned her every turn. No horn, no flashing lights, nothing but a cold, silent presence, like a patient animal hunting its prey. Its headlights didn't flash, but they seemed to. Look at her, not through the mirror, but straight at her neck, into the back of her head, so much so that she didn't dare turn around. Cold sweat beaded on her lips. Her hands began to shake on the wheel. And then she realized the license plate was missing. Just a black void, like a gaping mouth. The car behind followed closely, motionless in the silence of the night, as if it were driven not by a machine, but by a will. The will of something no longer human. Ariel tried to evade, accelerating suddenly, slowing suddenly, swerving quickly to the side of the road. But each time the gray car followed her like a shadow, learning her every move. No hesitation, no misstep, like it knew her every move. A quiet panic seeped into her bones. She had no doubt it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a stranger heading in the same direction. It was following her, on purpose, on purpose. And worst of all, there was nowhere to hide. No gas stations, no houses, no cell phone signal. Just the woods and the thick darkness, and the roar of the engine behind her every time she stepped on the gas, like an animal laughing. Her chest tightened. Every time she glanced in the rearview mirror, the headlights seemed closer, brighter, hot like human eyes. Or worse, she wasn't driving home anymore, she was running from something she couldn't name. Her heart pounded. Not in time, it felt like it was being squeezed from within. The fear was no longer a feeling, but a reality, an invisible hand wrapped around her chest, squeezing her breath until her lungs felt torn apart. Not the fear of someone pointing a gun. Worse, This was the fear of prey that knew it had been chosen, and the hunter was playing. She needed a plan, a turn, a place to run, a point of light, but the road ahead was just an endless black strip, swallowing the headlights as if it didn't want her to go anywhere. The trees on either side seemed to close in behind her, each branch and leaf silent as silent witnesses. There was no stop, no sign, nothing but herself, and something following. Close, so close. Then the fuel light came on like a red eye in the night. The fuel needle dropped straight to the bottom, without hesitation, as if someone had strangled the engine. 8 miles. The only gas station still open. But 8 miles now sounded like 800, with that thing still silently following, not leaving. She swallowed. Cold sweat trickled down her spine. Under the accelerator, the car began to shudder slightly, almost gasping a warning, almost empty. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't. The shadow behind her hadn't blinked. If she pulled over, if the car died in the middle of the road, then the shadow would come, not to help, but to end it. This wasn't a drive anymore. This was a countdown, and the night was laughing at her. She gasped as if emerging from a drowning dream. Her hands were white on the wheel, and she forced the car forward through fear, through the edge of endurance. Every mile felt like a scissors cut into her nerves, tearing away the last thread of calm. Everything inside her screamed, "Stop!" But she couldn't. Not with the shadow still looming behind her. Not with the lights following her like a bleeding wound. Was it a mistake? The beau at the party? The look that lingered a beat too long? The time she broke away from the group to call home? Or all of it? She didn't know who she was running from. All she knew, it hadn't stopped. And the night was too long to survive if she lost control. Finally, she saw a neon light flickering in the distance, a gas station sign, a mirage in the midst of despair. Without thinking, she turned the wheel sharply, the tires screeching on the gravel, almost missing the station. Legs numb with shaking and fatigue, she threw herself out of the car, slamming the studio window. The click of the lock behind her sounded like a chain locking a cage. She stood panting in the fluorescent room, the pale blue light making everything seem like a dead dream. For a moment, just a moment, she believed she was safe. But then the lights flickered, and from the corner of the window she saw the mud-covered Nissan parked at the curb. The engine was off, but no one got out. No one needed to get out. She crept closer to the window, her breath fogging coldly on the glass. Outside, the Ultima slid to the edge of the parking lot, like a wild animal scouting its prey. The engine didn't shut off, it hummed steadily, as if thinking. Inside the cabin, the windows were blacked out. No driver in sight, no movement, just a mud-covered mass, motionless like a mechanical coffin awaiting orders. She didn't blink. A false sense that someone or something was watching her from behind the darkened glass. A chill ran down her spine, and then without warning, the engine roared. The roar was a strangled scream. The car spun, tires screeching, and then plunged into the night as if drawn by something invisible. Silence fell behind, heavier than the noise. But she knew it hadn't gone far. She told the gas station attendant, her voice cracking. He was silent for a few seconds, then nodded and picked up the phone. The police arrived 15 minutes later, 2 officers, their patrol car lights cutting through the darkness. They were serious, professional. She told him everything. The Ultima, the tailing, the gas station as a last lifeline. They nodded, took notes. But she saw something familiar in their eyes. suspicion masked by politeness. When the police car drove away, she stood in the flickering fluorescent light. Her body was as stiff as wire. Sweat had dried to salt on her skin. But the fear did not go away. It was sticky like hot tar, sticky, black and indelible. Back home she turned on all the lights, closed all the curtains, but the cold still crept up her spine like a parasite. A hot shower didn't wash away the feeling of being watched. Small noises, pipes groaning, wood expanding, wind brushing against glass, all became strange whispers. She tried to sleep, but her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something. It was as if whatever had followed her on the road hadn't left, just waiting for her to turn off the lights again. From that night on, she vowed never to drive alone through deserted country roads after dusk. But the vow wasn't based on reason. It was based on survival instinct, something that whispered that she had touched something not quite of this world, and that it might still remember her. A few weeks later, a late-night news report flashed across her screen when she wasn't paying any particular attention. It was just background noise, until the words, Alabama, and gray Nissan Altima hit her like a cold knife. She spun around, her heart dropping to her stomach. The image appeared, security camera footage of two strangers, faces covered, walking out of a gas station. An old Nissan Altima, paint peeling, rear wheels misaligned exactly like the one that had followed her. The report ended with, "Police believe the two suspects are still at large, possibly armed and extremely dangerous." She didn't remember rising from her seat. All she knew was that her palms were cold, and a single sentence echoed in her head. If I had stopped that night. Ariel stood frozen in the kitchen, the TV still flickering behind her. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the horror of that night had been no joke, no panicked imagination. The car tailing her was real. The people inside, a remnant of violence, of blood, of dark streets with no way back. She began to shiver, not from the cold, but from the slow, encroaching realization. If she stopped, if the car had turned off, if they had gotten out, would the phone call at the gas station have scared them away? Or had she simply not been the priority prey that night? She would never know, and that kept her from sleeping peacefully. She never got an update. No call, no confirmation. That night still open like an unfinished book, each page bleeding with fear and things no one told. If anything changed, if that nightmare took human form again, she would tell. But until then, those winding, dark country roads would never see her headlights again. Not after dusk. Never again.